Dude, it's crazy how
Here we go. Here with the filibuster.
like
You're
there's more
scared. You don't
Protestants
really
than
have an
Orthodox
answer.
in the world, but I swear on Roblox there's more Orthodox than Protestants.
Go to Orthodox.
Protestants don't really debate their stance like that.
Yeah, I also had a question on Catholic theology, like Thomism
Okay,
and
sure,
stuff like
but to
that.
answer your question, why am I Orthodox, or excuse me, why am I Catholic over Orthodox? The main point really is the papacy.
Authority, right? It's zero clue what he's talking about.
I was really convinced of the typological, like the biblical arguments for the papacy, as well as early church witness for the papacy, in lieu of Orthodox arguments from silence. So the best, at least in the early church, the best Orthodox arguments that exist were arguments from silence, which, as it stands, are kind of weak arguments. They're not bad, but they're generally weak. Whereas there were positive arguments on the Catholic side for the existence of the papacy, combined with the fact that doctrine does not have to fully exist in its like completely understood form at once. Right, in Isaiah 22:22, which is the argument that converted Cameron Bertuzzi as well, like the that papal argument. I would also push back against the tradition thing. So again, it's an argument from silence.
Before definitely talk to Nick here, who's also an Orthodox.
Sure. What's up, Nick?
Yeah, I had a question. Yeah, appreciate that. My question would be like, what is your best evidence for the papacy? Since you guys obviously believe in development of doctrine, I'm an Eastern Orthodox also, but I was, when you read some of the, can I finish real quick?
Yeah, sorry.
Because whenever you read some of the foundations, such the Code of the Emperor, look at the East and the West, the canons, I would say that's a direct contradiction to Vatican I whenever it talks about you can do it without the consent of the other bishops, but the canons talk about you need consent, etc., stuff like that. So how do we go from these pentarchal views in authority, and they say that's universal outside of Rome? If you want to read Augustine on that, how do we go from that to the papal magisterium?
I think. Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think there's a balance between not only the consent of the bishops, but also consent for the sake of unity. So if the bishops are 50-50 split, well, who do we side with? And that's why Catholicism appealed to me when I was converting, as opposed to Orthodoxy, because there was a sense of the papacy exists not only to, issue infallible statements, do all these things, sure, but also as a sign of unity of the church. And I mean, we know this even from local, parishes, that every body has one pastor, right? And so it seems illogical that we're going to stop that when we get to the church universal. You know what I mean? So there is that for the sake of unity.
Okay.
And simply because, if all the bishops, or excuse me, not all the bishops, but if the bishops disagree with each other, let's say, again, it's a 50-50 split, well, where do we go from here? That's why the keys of the kingdom have to lie on with one person and not many people. Because the buck has to stop with somebody, right?
Can I respond to that?
Just for the sake of unity, in that sense.
Can I respond to that real quick?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so my argument would be, well, whenever we look at a universal clause, Ignatius was the first one to use the word universal, and I would think that's the whole pentarchy. And let me explain, because whenever Augustine is talking about, in his letter, he talks about, suppose there is no good bishops in Rome, there still remained a plenary council of the universal church. And we've seen Constantinople called the New Rome throughout history. So my question would be like, yeah, we could assert there needs to be a final jurisdiction, whatever, but how does that have authority over every church and can do without the consent of all? And where was that in the first millennium? I'm looking for evidence, rather, for my opinion, on my side.
Sure, I don't know a ton about, it's really great. I've spent so much time arguing with Protestants because I live in like a very Protestant area. So I'll be honest, I don't know a ton about like Catholic versus Orthodox, specifically apologetics.
Okay.
Have you looked much at what Pope Leo has said as far as a first century witness? And in terms of like, from the Catholic perspective, where do you think Catholics say like there is no more debate, like there was definitely a Pope, like by Vatican I standards, by this time? Like, do you think that like we don't identify popes, like exercising that kind of authority until after the schism?
Well, when you go to Pope Leo, when he talks about, for example, Peter being the assertion of the whole world, but we also look at what did John Chrysostom, he says the whole world is Antioch, if you look at his written, and then we see, the succession of Peter is Antioch in his words. So yes, we can say and agree on. What was that?
Succession of Peter is Antioch?
Yeah, that's a quote from John Chrysostom. Look that up.
True, but the chair of Peter remains in Rome. Saint Cyprian of Carthage is very clear on it. I believe in, let me see.
Well, can I finish my point to him real quick?
Treatise 4,
Yeah, sure, my bad.
you're looking for. But
No,
yes,
you're fine. So yeah, whenever we look at Antioch, we look at the Pentarch, we see that these having his authority. So to say that, the Vatican I is related to these things, I would say it would be a stretch. I would say there's no evidence for that. And to say that, you said, where did I get this? Where do you think Catholics get this idea from? Well, in our view, we think it's political and we think it's geopolitical, such as with the Filioque. I think that grew through that. And that would be my argument with that, because outside of the political aspect of it and the rise of it, there's a lot of books on it. There was no universal, jurisdiction over all these churches without consent. Of course, we believe Rome was number one. That's that's undeniable. We respect Rome, but that's just, to us, we would be arguing the whole ecclesiology and how that happened, because the universal church was not in Rome, and it's talked about that. Augustine talks about that. It's talked about constantly. And Peter is Antioch. He is a successor of Antioch.
Go.
So that would be my argument for that.
Is there like a homily from John Chrysostom you could point me to from this, or like a letter?
Yeah, it's John Chrysostom on Ignatius of Antioch on newadvent.com. It's on Saint Ignatius.
Homily on Ignatius, is that page 50? Because the quote I see says, Peter, the chief of the apostles, the first in the church, the friend of Christ, after he had governed the church at Antioch, went to Rome. It was there that Peter, the leader of the apostles, first sat.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, he says, do you want me to, I don't know if I could, how I can send it to you, but he says...
Oh, you can't quote it? Or just read it?
Yeah, I'll quote it. Yeah, quote. And at any rate, this city, he's talking about Antioch, was much of account to God, and indeed he manifested by the very deeds which he did all the events to the master of the whole world, Peter, whose hands he committed the keys of heaven, who be commanded to and to bear all. He bade tarry here for a long period, thus in the sight of our city, remember he's talking about Ignatius of Antioch, was equivalent to the whole world. So Antioch is equivalent to the whole world, equivalent to Peter. But since I have mentioned Peter, I have perceived a fifth crown woven from him, and that is this man, Ignatius of Antioch, succeeded to the office after him. Quote. So my ecclesiology is that this Pentarch hold this authority from the start.
Oh, just because Peter was there. See, that's the thing is, and there was somebody else that had come in here and was talking about that too, about how, because Peter was martyred and established his bishopric in Rome specifically, that's why it's carried on from Rome.
No, that wasn't my argument.
Antioch. No. I know that wasn't yours. That was my argument against another guy. But then he was asking about that. Man, I wish I could help you out more. I just don't have a lot of Orthodox apologetics, to be honest. I don't really focus on Orthodoxy that much apart from my initial conversion.
Okay.
Because, I don't know, I think just the philosophical argument for the papacy in terms of, especially from unity, just makes more sense to me, because Orthodoxy isn't as united. And I think there is a case to be made about the truth of a church.
Wait. Why do you say Orthodoxy isn't as united?
What are you talking about? Like the Greek versus this Greek ongoing schism? Is that what you're talking about? You think that means it's not united? That we talking about?
Yeah, that's a crazy claim to make in itself. You gotta justify that.
I do want to start to cut you off. I do want to make it, because I came in here and you were saying you're making claims about Orthodoxy, so I was like, this guy's got to know what he's talking about. Not to be rude or anything, but that's why I came in here kind of confident. Is he still here? Because if that was the case, we can make the argument about, SSPX, Sedevacantism, etc. But we don't really make that argument. I make the argument there's no proof for the papacy.
Oh, yeah. Was it me that I was talking about the Orthodoxy? What was I talking about?
Yeah, there was somebody in here talking about Orthodoxy. I forgot his name. I think it was this gentleman, Mango, I believe, or somebody else. And then he was, maybe not Mango. I'm not sure who it was. It was another Orthodox in here. Oh, I think it was GG33. He said...
It's like 3 Orthodox names.
Yeah. They asked you,
there's a few
why do you choose Catholicism over Orthodoxy? And then you said, well, I think it's more united and it's more authoritative. Then I asked you, and you said, well, I'm not really sure about Orthodoxy.
Well, I wasn't trying to make a positive argument. I was just answering their question, like
Okay.
why yeah, you know, again, and that's just for me, I think. You know, and I'm sure a part of it is also that they're like I live in an area that doesn't have orthodoxy.
If it's okay to add on, I just want to say, I'm just happy you're not a Protestant, brother. I mean, I would love for you to be an
you know,
Orthodox,
and that's the
but
thing is, if I wasn't
thank God you're not
Catholic, I would be
Protestant.
Orthodox, and
I mean, I think every
that is a
Catholic would
fact.
just
I'd be Orthodox, and then honestly, I wouldn't be Protestant. I think ever. I'd probably
Yeah, of
just
course not.
genuinely be atheist if I wasn't Catholic or Orthodox,
Wait,
because I know
Bob,
Protestantism makes no sense. So it's
Yeah.
like I would have to, I don't know,
Yeah.
be a
I actually have a question.
hedonist.
So do you
Yeah.
know much about the filioque? Because that's like one thing I've not like looked into a whole
No,
lot.
I don't
Is,
know a
like, the filioque.
ton, dude. Don't even get me started. I have no idea. Whenever it comes to the filioque, I'm just like, the papacy argument would settle the filioque.
Yeah, well, can I clarify what I wanted? I was talking about the, Ignatius. My point was, therefore, if that quote would be true, I would say I'd have more evidence than the papal side by far, because I think that's the whole ecclesiology, and I think we're coming based off evidence. And to say the papacy, we need a final jurisdiction judge, but the universal church and the plenary councils are outside of Rome, quoted multiple times. So my point would be, where do you get this idea that, I guess you already said you're not really, critiqued on it, which is
Sure,
fine, but
yeah.
I'm just saying, as a Catholic, you should have it as your ground, in my opinion, no?
Yeah, yeah, man. I'll definitely check it out for you. All right. I'll DM you later. No, I'm just playing. I can't DM you later.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go
Dude,
ahead.
I've got answers. What's up?
All right, well, I'm gonna head out.
Sound
Appreciate
like-
it.
Future. Yeah, man. Take care.
Weird.
So that's what happens, guys. You go on these Orthodox pages, these Catholic pages, they have zero clue what they're talking about.